Well, more clear skies and temperatures up near 70. So we're beginning that move into the spring months. It's certainly feeling like early spring. And there it is on the surface map. High pressure. We've got this one outgoing polar system across Louisiana. That's modified considerably. And then we have this other high over the Rockies, the old plateau high, sustained by radiational cooling over the higher terrain. Not much cold air to be found except up in the Great Lakes. You can see even in the Dakotas, they're up in the 50s. And we can see in Phoenix, temperatures up to 84. So we're seeing the appearance of a heat low in the southwestern deserts. Down to the south, Mexico is still contending with that old polar front, which is hung up in the Bay of Campeche. Wind still 20 knots out of the north there near that gap, and you can see on the other side a little bit covered up, but temperatures above 90 due to downslope warming. And that tends to be a little bit warm for that part of the continent. And then up to the north in the Canadian high Arctic, well, we've got the other extreme, plenty of cold air, minus 38 on Banks Island. That's probably the coldest reading that I'm seeing. And since we have cold air up in the Canadian high Arctic with high pressure and then low pressure down to the south, that means that the air could start moving southward. Now, we're certainly not going to see anything like 2 weeks ago, but some of the cold air may return to the Canadian prairies and maybe even the northern U.S. So this is probably a good time to turn to the upper level chart. This is how things look over the northern hemisphere, North America located here, Asia at the top of the page, and Europe off to the right side. So we're looking at the winds up at 250 millibars, about 34,000 feet, and it kind of forms up into a series of troughs and ridges. The ridge is located right there where it bends up towards the polar regions, and then the troughs, those bend southward. Now, if we take a look at the large wavelength, the long wavelength troughs like these, that indicates the location of the long waves. So it looks like we have one long wave right there. We have another long wave in this area here, and probably another one here, and I'm not sure if that's a fourth. These could be two separate systems. So when we're looking at a 4 to 5 wave pattern, that means it's somewhat stationary to slightly progressive. And that tends to be a very normal configuration. Now, in terms of blocks, do we have any blocking patterns? Now, a block will be indicated where we have very sharp troughs or ridges, like out here in Greenland. That's going to be a block. And you can see the flow here trying to dig underneath it and shear it off. So yeah, there's a block out in the Atlantic Ocean, and that tends to lock up the pattern upstream. In other words, across North America. So we're not going to really see things change across North America as a whole for about the next week maybe. And you can see that playing out here on the U.S. map. This is 300 millibars up at about 30,000 feet. A large long wave, well, maybe kind of a medium wave ridge. Depends what we want to call those long waves out in the Atlantic and off of California, whether they're one system or two. But anyway, large, we'll say medium wave ridge, and we run that forward through Friday, Saturday, and it just kind of stays in place, these smaller scale troughs, trying to break it down, but not really succeeding. Those ridges build right back up. So that tells us that we're going to be kind of warm across the Rockies and central U.S., at least for another week, and maybe this next trough early next week may try to break it down. That's a pretty large chunk of energy. And yeah, that kind of grinds it right down. There's a good trough right there moving out into the plains around the 12th or 13th. Hopefully that's not a repeat of March 13th of 1990, big tornado outbreak in Nebraska. So hopefully that's not going to be going on. Anyway, that progresses eastward, and it looks to me like maybe there's been a little retrogression of the large-scale ridge, because now it's out over California. later in the month. And yeah, not much change. This kind of paints out the idea of long wave ridging out west and troughing out towards the east. But it is going to be active. You can see we've just had this series of troughs moving through one after the other. So that's going to keep us probably kind of busy for much of March. Now, one area that we probably want to keep our eye on is in Iceland. I don't know how many of you follow the news or social media, but there's an imminent volcanic eruption that is possible about 15 to 20 miles southwest of Reykjavik. There's the peninsula there in southwestern Iceland. That's Reykjavik right there. Keflavik, which is a naval station, is located right there, and the volcano is expected to take place there. And if you go to that icelandgeology.net website, that takes you to a YouTube stream. Of course, it's not showing anything at the moment because it's nighttime there, but maybe in the morning there will be something to see. But there's the long wavelength harmonic tremors, and you can see it really picked up there around the 25th, and I guess it's getting a little bit more active since they're raising some of the alert levels. And of course, harmonic tremors mean the movement of large amounts of magma underneath the volcano. So it's going to be located right there, and we pull out the distance tool, and yeah, it's about 11 miles from the outskirts of Reykjavik. It's not expected to be a large volcano, though, but if it does erupt, there should be some good coverage. If that happens, we'll cover a little bit of the weather aspects, not so much the geology. And we can use some of the resources like the NOAA high-split tool to forecast the location of the plume and where all that stuff will be going. Now, if anything does happen in the next few days, we can look at some of these weather tools just to get an idea of what the plume will be doing. Unfortunately, most of the model websites do not have a good sector for Iceland and Greenland, so we'll just kind of make do here. The volcano is going to be located right there. We can see that there's high pressure covering much of Iceland, and there's a light southerly flow. The upper level flow, well, that can be inferred by the thickness pattern, and it looks like it's light westerly. So most likely the plume will be going north to northeast. However, that's going to change as the high recedes out to the east, and you can see that southerly flow start to develop. The flow looks like it still will be out of the southwest tomorrow. So let's see, tomorrow morning we can pull up a forecast skew-t, and that'll give you the profile. And you can use that photograph right there to get an idea of what the plume will be doing. So in the low levels, it will be carried to the north. In the mid levels, very slowly to the northeast. And at the higher levels, to the east. So with a very weak eruption, your VEIs of like 2 to 3 to 4, that's going to carry it kind of in that band of 1 to 3 kilometers mostly. And it's only your Strombolian and Plinian eruptions that will go up into the higher levels of the troposphere. So we're not going to worry too much about that. But yeah, winds about 10 knots on average, so that plume is not going to be moving too much. Even in the jet stream levels, 10 knots. Does anything change a few days from now? Well, not really. Looks like the flow there is kind of light and variable through the weekend, so assuming it erupts on Saturday, well, the winds aloft do kind of increase, pushes the plume in the upper levels towards Greenland, but I'm not sure the cloud is going to get that high. It should very likely get into the mid-levels, and that would carry it to the north, over Reykjavik and up towards the northwest portion of the island. And you can see some stratification being indicated right there. So with the weaker eruptions, most of the ash will be underneath here, and I'm not too sure much of it will make it into the upper levels. It really depends. We just don't have any idea, what the end result is going to be if and when it does erupt. So those are just some things to look at, and we'll kind of wait till tomorrow and see what happens. So back to the U.S. Well, there's the air mass summary for this evening. The high pressure over East Texas, and that means we're going to be developing that return flow tonight. We may see the appearance of stratus in the Rio Grande Valley, San Antonio, Austin, and that should start spreading north. So that will make things more spring-like. However, a trough lurks out towards the west. There it is right there. You can see the curvature in the thickness indicating an upper-level trough in that region. So we need to start looking at precipitable water. And that's one way of following the moisture. You can see it setting up right there around Brownsville, and as we go through the overnight hours, it is spreading north, coming up into the Rio Grande region and spreading those 1-inch precipitable water amounts all the way up towards San Antonio by tomorrow night. And now we've got a cyclone there in Oklahoma. We've got 0.75 all the way up towards Oklahoma City and Wichita, and we've probably got the dry line active. I would say probably, where's my brown color? Yeah, there it is right there. Dry line from Wichita Falls southward towards the hill country. And probably a warm front somewhere around the Red River region and a cold front on the west side around the panhandles. Now we can sample that moisture return around Dallas and get an idea of the depth, the cap strength, and all that. And there's the profile for Dallas. Let's see, this is going to be tomorrow night, about midnight. And it does look like a pretty strong cap there. We can see the moisture depth is all the way up to about 5,000 feet. However, it's only upper 40s dew points, so the moisture is not really that charged. It is flooded back, but just not much kick to it, really. But we can see it there on the photograph there. That's the low-level jet, that little hook right there. 35-knot low-level jet developing overnight. And if we roll that forward to 3 a.m., we can see some veering and a bit of weakening in that low-level jet. There's 6 a.m. at weekends, so I'm thinking probably there's been frontal passage. And indeed, we bring that up to 6 a.m. and we can see the moisture is a lot further east, and I think we're getting cold advection into the Dallas and Waco areas. So let's back that up a little bit earlier in the stage of this storm's development. Let's go all the way back to 0Z. This is tomorrow night around 6 p.m. What does the air mass look like at Wichita Falls? Let's pull up that sounding. And as it comes up, we see that there is weak moisture, mostly mid-40s dew points. That's not what we want to see during a severe weather day, so this points to high bases, not much organization, and a highly sheared environment. Also, well, we've got some moderately steep lapse rates. There is some instability. But with the moisture being weak in the low levels, we're just not seeing that in the capes. So if we actually constructed a lifted parcel, yeah, that's just not enough to do it. So this would point towards weak convection. Let's see if things are better up north. Let's go all the way up towards Enid. The atmosphere up there may be a little bit cooler in the mid and upper levels. And yeah, that does look to be the case, but the moisture is tapering off with height. So that's another problem, and still no help with the capes. But man, look at that low-level jet there. 40 knots out of the south, and even a little bit of backing to that directional flow coming out of the south-southeast there. So if we had a little bit of help with the instability, that would be a darn good tornado profile. So it's a classic case of too little, too late. So if we want to see how everything really plays out, let's go down to the severe weather indices, and we'll just look at the most unstable cape. Well, we don't have most unstable cape, but we'll take a look at the surface-based cape. Here's Thursday at 4 p.m. Little glimmer of instability there around Guyman, and then around 0Z. It's firming up around Elk City all the way up towards Fort Supply and up towards Elkhart and Liberal. So it is going to be very iffy. You can see those dew points are still very pitiful, upper 40s. But man, look at that lapse rate. It's dry adiabatic. So here, yeah, that's the contribution of strong mid-level cooling from all that dynamic forcing in the mid-levels. So you might be able to get some high base stuff going, but probably your best odds are going to be further up to the northwest on a day like this. You want to head northwest. So here's how things look around Slap Out, Oklahoma. Further up the line, very impressive lapse rates, but that moisture is troublesome. 40s tapering off to dry air up at 5,000 feet. So I'm not too sure how far northwest you'd want to go. I guess probably the best bet here is around Canadian towards Woodward. But you just have to hope some of that moisture makes it northward, because it is going to be very iffy. Yep, that's a tornadic sounding right there if we had enough instability and moisture, which we do not. But if enough was able to get going and form an updraft, you could get some very high-based LPs out of this kind of situation. So it's kind of looking to me like maybe, yeah, around Canadian, Woodward, maybe a little bit further south down the Oklahoma-Texas border. Sorry, I know those maps are kind of hard to read, so let's check out one more plot of dew points. That's the other one that would be pretty important. We'll run that forward through tomorrow. Okay, there's noon. There's 3 p.m. There is some actual convergence along the dry line right there. And then by 6 p.m., yeah, pretty good convergence, but you can see your better moisture is down to the south. So the atmosphere has just not been able to recover. Then up to the north, you can see the polar air moving south. That's the cold front. Triple point located right there south of Woodward, Canadian. And I don't know if there's a warm front in there, but maybe something like that. But definitely the dry line. That's right down there. That's going to be Vernon down towards Abilene and back towards Sanderson. So if there was more moisture, this could be a good area to play up here around Liberal, Kansas, but I'd be more inclined to stay south on a day like that. So that's how things look for tomorrow, and I guess we're probably about 15 minutes in, and that'll be a good place to stop. So I want to thank you for joining us once again, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow for the Thursday edition of Forecast Lab. Have a good one. Take care, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.